Welcome to the Perfect Score Mindset, where a perfect score on a standardized test is a realistic and attainable goal. My name is Arvind Vora. I'm the founder of Vora Method, and a perfect score on multiple tests, including the GRE and the GMAT, and many of my students have gotten perfect scores on tests like the SAT and the ACT. In this video, we're going to talk about a dilemma that you face when you're training. And this dilemma is, what do you do when you're reading a passage on a practice test? You're just at home taking a practice test. You're reading a passage and you see a word that you don't know. You don't know what the word means. What do you do? Now, you really only have two choices. One is try to figure it out from context, and two is look it up, right? And the conventional wisdom is that you should try to figure it out from context, because when you're taking the test, you can't bring a dictionary with you, and therefore you have to practice the skill of figuring words out in context. And what I'm going to tell you is this: if you're trying to get a perfect score, that method is absolutely wrong. The right way to do reading training, if you're doing your reading training right, you're actually building two things. You're building your vocabulary and you're building your concept map. Vocabulary, you know what that is, means knowing what words means. And as you go through your reading training, let's say it takes you 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, by the end of that training, your vocabulary should be a lot bigger than it is at the beginning. So if your vocabulary is not getting bigger, you're not doing your reading training right at all. That's one piece. The second piece is what we call the concept map. And that's the number of things that you know about in the world, all right? And the concept map is important because it lets you understand other things, often through analogies or comparisons that are done inside of SAT and ACT passages. Let me give you an example. Suppose a passage says, this tree acts like a dog pound for insects. Now, if you know what a dog pound is, you can figure that out. But if you didn't know what a dog pound was, you would be likely to misread it, either saying something like the tree weighs a pound, wrong, or that the tree is a dog, or the tree is for dogs, or something like that. But if you understand what a dog pound is, you're then able to use that analogy. So that's the advantage of broadening your concept map. The more things you know about, the better. And your reading training needs to be about broadening your concept map and improving your vocabulary. Now, let's say you do the other thing, right? Let's say you just do vocabulary in context, which is what most people do. And again, most people don't get perfect scores, and this is one big reason why. Let's say you just say, I'm going to just do this in context to create a realistic situation. What you then do is you develop a habit of incomplete understanding. You start to get used to the idea that the way you should read is with some partial understanding, but not complete understanding. Trust me on this, if you're reading with partial understanding, you're not getting a perfect score. You need to learn to read with complete understanding and learn what that feels like. You should know what it means to thoroughly and completely understand a passage. When I'm training for a standardized test, I don't use a timer on a passage. I take whatever time I need, and that might mean a passage might take me 5 weeks. You know what? That's fine, because in those 5 weeks, I'm improving my understanding, increasing my concept map, and improving my vocabulary, and that's going to be the key of improving your reading comprehension score. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that what you need to do is you need to be able to figure out words from context. Absolutely. But that's your last-ditch resort. The way I look at it is this: figuring out vocabulary from context is kind of like using violence. Is there a time for violence? Sure. Is it a very frequent time? Definitely not. If you started settling every dispute with violence, you'd be a lunatic. And if you're constantly using word context to figure out what words means, you're being a vocabulary lunatic. You're not building your vocabulary to the level you need. Now, I'm not saying that I've never used context to figure out a word on a standardized test and later gotten a perfect score. I absolutely have. But I've done that maybe once per test. If you're using context once per test, fine. If you're using it like 5 times per passage, you need to build your vocabulary and you need to increase the size of your concept map. There is no other way around it. You cannot get a perfect score with a small vocabulary, and you cannot get a perfect score with a small concept map. Here's another way to look at this. When I take a standardized test, I know more things at the end of that test than I did at the beginning. In other words, I've literally learned information from the passages. The passage might be about Abraham Lincoln or frogs or whatever. At the end of those, 3 or 4, whatever number of hours, I know more about Abraham Lincoln and frogs than I did at the beginning. That's what actual reading looks like. It's not like, I don't know what this means, let me try to figure out some things, let me use some patterns. That's not perfect score reading at all. So here's my advice for you. If you're trying to get a perfect score on a reading section, SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, whatever, you need to start looking up every single word you don't know and start taking the time on your passages to make sure you thoroughly understand them completely. That's going to allow you to build the 2 most important parts of reading comprehension, and that's your vocabulary and your concept map. Listen, if you want to learn more about this or if you want to get direct help on your own training, you can check us out at voramethod.com.